Okay.
Yeah, I'm starting to record it right now. So anyway, back to thank you, Henry. Anyway, back to the open config. So that's the primary reason why I'm inquiring about this, Gaurav. So
Understood, Thomas.
okay. So if I can then, if there is any sort of question about priorities relative to other sort of improvements, then I would definitely rank that the highest.
Okay, understood. So basically, from the compiler perspective, I think we should be good to be completed before, I think, first week of next month. Only thing what I am concerned is we have not tested the runtime basically with that aspect, basically pushing the JSON from the REST and checking whether based on those open config the devices are getting configured. So there might be some missing piece either in runtime or maybe some other components involved in that. So that piece I am not sure, but compiler piece I can ensure like we will be able to complete.
Yeah, so I would definitely focus on that first, so that we can compile the open config models as they are, without any changes, and be able to essentially ship them as a built-in extension, model extension with ONOS. And I clearly, I mean, if there is defects, we can work on those subsequent, either as part of a maintenance release for the Loon branch, or as part of the yet to be named M release. So okay. So and the second question to you then, Gaurav, would be, what is the status of the live compilation? Is that something? I noticed that there were check-ins going in actually quite a while back, but I wasn't quite sure whether it's considered to be finished or what work remains.
Okay. Regarding the OAR generation is something I feel like in this release we would not be able to take it up. The GET APIs, definitely we would be taking it up in this release and would be targeting to wind them up by this release.
Wait, I'm not quite sure. I guess I followed which API?
Okay. Basically, regarding the live compiler and the web resource, there are two open points. One is the GET APIs implementation.
The GET, what do you mean by GET?
Basically, from the REST, we can query we can get the modules. So REST-based.
Okay. I see. So that's a REST API to the model, to the runtime subsystem, effectively. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I was primarily concerned about the ability to be able to post basically a set of resources and to have them be compiled on the fly. That's all.
Okay, so from that aspect, basically that OAR generation is something I am not sure whether I would be able to complete it by this release, looking at the other activities what are already there.
So if I can then make a suggestion, then definitely don't, and especially if it resource-wise, if it competes for completion with open config, then I would definitely deprioritize this. And this is something that I should be able to either help, whether it's part of this release or next release, that's fine. But I definitely would like to have the open config be ranked higher in terms of urgency and priority.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect, Thomas.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks. All right, and so I think that at least that answers my questions on those 2 points. And so if nobody else has any other questions or points to add to those 2 categories, we can maybe move on to the other ones, which were the RESTconf and sort of the proxy capability, and then the device synchronizer stuff. Henry, did you want to go first on providing an update on the RESTconf? I think you're muted, Henry.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, okay. So for the RESTconf, if my understanding is correct, that we treat like a, from the root, right, from root to device as a special path, right? It's not a model by Yan. And that should be a 1 week work. I'll create a Jira for that, right? A story for that, and then we can go from there, right? The requirement, right, would be that we use young runtime only for the second part, starting from like after the device, right, to get the resource ID resolved by the young compiler. But /device will be the resource ID that RESTconf need to formulate, and then the final resource ID that pass into dynamic config will be like a concatenated version of the resource ID. That's my understanding to treat the /device as a special path, right? Acting like a proxy. Is that make sense to you guys? Okay. So for that, we'll probably it's not difficult, all right, in implementation to do. And then we will go from there. That's one. So the device proxy is one story. The second, the second is the RESTconf filter. That is a work item that need also implement the filter on the dynamic config side. Probably can do both after the child ordering feature in the dynamic config is finished. Then we can do the RESTconf filter. So I got two work items: the RESTconf proxy and the RESTconf filter. Right. That's on the RESTconf part.
All right. Great. Thanks, Henry.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, and I think then on the dynamic, on the device synchronizer side, Yuta, do you want to provide an update on that?
Okay, so basically I'm working on the groundwork moving toward that. I guess we will need a notion of sort of relative resource ID and so on. So I've started creating those kind of utility, like the one Henry mentioned about concatenating resource ID and so on. And there were some APIs which missing, which would be inconvenient when constructing resource ID. So I have a patch for Yangto in flight on Get. So if people can take a look. One thing I sort of have concern is that I guess technically speaking, this Friday is going to be a feature freeze, but it's okay. We just keep working on this. So the device tree restructuring afterward I mean, I'm definitely not going to finish it toward this Friday for sure. So I was wondering.
Yeah. I think. I mean, it's a good point, but I think we're going to basically exempt this area. Clearly, we'll be careful of what kind of new functionality we'll allow, but I think we will squint a little bit and allow some new features to be added, new changes to be added, meaning things other than defects. But clearly, we will not want to put in major changes. But I think reasonable size improvements we should be able to just let in. I'll talk with Ian about that.
Okay, thanks. So basically, yeah, I'll be first working on groundwork required to implement the schemaless device tree, then start looking into the synchronizer part of work. So it's going to be a bit tight schedule.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, I mean, I think But given the fact that the entire subsystem as it is today is really not usable for production quite yet, I think we can afford to take some risks by allowing late check-ins. So, and it'll, it's recognized that it'll continue to be still ongoing work, even past this release.
Okay, got it. Then that is my current state. Yes, thank you.
But for me, primarily just as a kind of from a big picture where we stand, the dynamic configuration subsystem, which is the ability to be able to track all of the information that's structured, that's ingested by ONOS and structured in accordance with the Yang models. That part of the system are still clearly will continue to have to evolve, and that's not usable now. But what I would like to do is to get to the point where the outcome of the ONOS Yang tools, which is the Java classes and schema, can continue to be used as part of the drivers, for example, like what microsemi drivers use. That there's nothing that should prevent people from should be stopping or preventing people from using that for that purpose, even for production code, right? So there's kind of two different modes of use for the ONOS Yang tools. One is for basically just compiling the models and producing Java APIs and Java objects, which can be used for drivers and for various other purposes to directly interact with the devices. I think that should be in good shape, and clearly the microsemi drivers shown that they've been able to do that for quite some time already. Mm-hmm. And a dynamic configuration subsystem, which kind of is the store for all this information, and which kind of allows and the protocols on the north and south that allow other entities to interact with the environment through ONOS, that clearly will need to continue to evolve. And so for the webinar, what I would like to do is, the focus there will not be necessarily in dynamic configuration. The focus there will be on the Yang tools and on the open config, which is why we're having the Google participation on there. And that's
Thomas.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, is the date for the webinar confirmed?
Yes, it will be.
Is there any
September 11th? Yes.
Okay. Fine.
And I'll be one of the panelists, and I'll be, Anis and I will be the main panelists there.
Okay.
And we'll be, having to have the materials. I mean, clearly, I don't expect this will involve any live demos or anything like that. This will be simply just conveying the status of the work, the rationale for the work, and sort of the overall rationale of the approach behind the work. So things that we will be emphasizing will be that the ONOS Yang tools are project independent, which is that even though they carry ONOS in the name, they're not tied to ONOS in a specific way. They can be used by others, and sort of emphasizing on the overall philosophy of allowing the use of these tools to be to assist in creating abstractions rather than and exposing the applications to abstractions rather than to direct outcome of the Yang models.
Understood.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to close the window here. I have some people making noise outside. It never fails when I'm having meetings. People decide to either that they need to mow their lawns or something. Okay, so I mean that's all I had. Is there any other updates that we should mention? Sithara is not here, so I'm not sure exactly what the status of the event consolidation work is. I need to talk with her next week.
Can I, Thomas? Can I ask a relatively separate question?
Sure.
There, so in the project that I'm doing, right? We have a demand, not immediately, but in the future, we see a demand to decouple dynamic config from the model-driven applications that use dynamic config. They couple them in the sense that they run into two different clusters. So dynamic config run in a set of cluster to look like a young database. Model-driven applications such as the device drivers or ACTN run in a different node. But then the problem is that they need to call dynamic config API remotely. So right, it should not be cannot be a straight API call like today, but instead it's like a protocol buffer, gRPC, those kind of interface between dynamic config. Is what I'm saying make sense?
Well, so what you're describing effectively is a case of a federation scenario, right? Where one control domain is communicating with another control domain and exchanging information about each other, right?
Yeah. Yes, and yes, and the data is on a different control domain, like the dynamic config. Those data is on different control domain, and the user domain controller does not save any data, right? It is basically just a business and logic domain.
Sure. Yes.
Make sense? Yeah. Okay. But how do I do that?
Well, so again, the question is what kind of information you expose, and that is one thing, and second is what you're going to use to exchange it, which is a separate thing. And
yeah,
I honestly don't know what so the general philosophy on federation is that in order to maintain some separation between the two separate control domains, and separation as in terms of encapsulate information, allow some information hiding, which means that let's say if it's in a hierarchical configuration, let's say we're talking about hierarchical federation configuration. So the low-level controllers should be free to abstract some information and hide some information away from what they expose to the outside, and expose only a sort of virtualized view of their realm to the upper layer.
Yeah.
The question is what information gets hidden and what information gets exposed. I know that.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I see. Yeah. Let me. Yeah. So let me clarify. Okay. My need. I think it's. I think Thomas, you are saying is basically an information abstraction, right? It's basically a level of abstraction, right, in different layers. Right? My use case is that I have a remote application that want to use dynamic config APIs. Remote meaning that it's run in a different container.
Yes.
So for example, it's a microservice. It's microservice A want to use dynamic config, which is another microservice. I am not sure.
So you're talking, okay, so what you're describing is a scenario where it's not necessarily a federation scenario, but more of a disaggregated control domain scenario where where the application which is running in its own container is still considered to be part of the same control domain. It just wants to use the dynamic configuration services.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so I see. So in that case, yeah, so we probably the choice is then the information hiding does not really come into effect here, and the idea here is now more focus should be on what kind of a protocol or interface mechanism should be used to assure that the disaggregated component high performance access to the basically to the underlying mechanism. And so yes, gRPC in here is probably the prime choice.
And okay, and we have a plan, right, to support like offer a gRPC interface, northbound interface.
Yeah, so
in dynamic config, yeah.
Not necessarily in dynamic. So this area is not fully cooked in terms of a concept. So yes, we have a gRPC brigade which is working on gRPC interfaces to the core ONOS model. However, today those gRPC interfaces are constructed by effectively handcrafting a translation and conversion layer, so that applications which are off platform somewhere else, not running within the ONOS container, which then use gRPC to interact with the ONOS container, the data gets translated into the core models and back out of the core models into gRPC. It is understood that that conversion process is, first of all, not necessarily sustainable for long term and or necessarily the highest performance. Clearly, the long-term goal would be to eventually get to the point where the ONOS core model is modeled in protobufs, and therefore, basically, the native services are modeled in gRPC. And so it doesn't really matter whether you're running on-platform or off-platform. All of the model representation is done using protobufs, and service interface generation is done gRPC. Then it's native gRPC and protobufs, and no such essentially explicit conversion between the handcrafted models that ONOS has today and gRPC will be required. But it will be,
okay.
yeah, it will be a long time. It will be some time before we get to that point. I would expect probably at least a year before we get to that point. And until we get to that point, I don't think we should be expecting high performance, fine grained access to information through this interface.
Right. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So right now, if I can, well, since RESTconf is a northbound API, right, offered for dynamic config. If the remote application wants to store data or retrieve data, it can go through RESTconf, which is very slow, right? But at least we can do the proof of concept.
Yeah, I mean, alternatives are also to use, alternatives could be for looser coupling could be to use GNMI, for example, right? Where you still use GNMI, but what goes over the stream could still be JSON, or could still be protobufs encoded in GR. Basically, Yang models encoded in protobufs.
Right, I'm not that familiar with. Okay, I'll do some study on GNMI. Okay. So you're saying we can still encode some JSON, right? Payload and then use a GNMI as the transport to, right?
Either that or potentially sort of natively encode the data nodes, right? Basically have an alternate serializer, deserializer.
Right.
So to have a basically to be able to result in protobuf definitions. There's now a number of different approaches that we could take, but my suggestion would be, to set the expectations. It will probably be some time before we have that available.
Yes. Okay. Yep. Makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yuta, you had some, I see in the comments, do you want to ask a question out loud?
I was simply asking, Henry used the word disaggregate and so on, so I was wondering if you were seeking for other option to store under dynamic config, or were you thinking about something external accessing dynamic config in a more efficient way?
The later, yeah, the later is my question.
I see.
Yeah. So I like to use dynamic config to store my data, but the user, the application, the client application who creates the data or want to retrieve the data is not necessarily sitting in the same microservice instance as dynamic config. That's my question. So basically, yes, your second question is my question.
I see.
Yeah, and of course, using the RESTconf as I mentioned, it's not performancely ideal, right? It's basically we don't want two internal microservice communicate using JSON strings, right? So instead, we're looking for some high performance data transfer, like how I can transfer data nodes between two containers, basically using a high performance bus. That's what I'm looking for. Right? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So, I remember one thing. So, I brought one thing about the device dynamic config event redesign kind of discussion on the email thread. So, if people have their opinion, if you could provide feedback to the thread, that would be helpful. I tried to describe the rationale why we would like to have sort of the actual data object itself on the event payload kind of thing. So
I see. Yeah. I recall that. Yep.
Yeah. So if you have some time, take a look and please give your input to that thread.
Great. All right. So I don't think if you have anything else, we can probably call it a day.
I think so. Yes.
Okay. Gaurav, do you have a minute? Really quick.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, Thomas.
Is there any help that you would need in terms of either the on a live compiler? I'm just trying to think the work Nietus is done for it, right? This is simply just a question of being able to integrate it into the running ONOS instance, right?
Right. So, majorly what I have not thought about it, Thomas, is like that OAR generation.
Yeah.
So, so that is the only missing piece. Yeah.
That's something I could help with because
Okay.
we may not necessarily even generate the OAR, even though today we do generate OAR. ONOS actually has, since Kingfisher, ONOS has capability to be able to accept applications as plain jars as long as they have the application and features manifest in them. So basically, if it's just a question of packaging and integration into the ONOS, I could probably take up that work and you guys don't have to worry about it. I just wanted to make sure that as long as we have the sort of the foundational work done in ONOS Yang tools, then I could, that's something I could do because I'm looking for a spare time project anyway. So
that would be great, Thomas. I surely like maybe that would be of some help. Basically, looking at the current things what are there in hand. So if you can help us with that, that would be definitely helpful.
All right. So I'll take a look at it to see if I can get oriented, and if I have any questions, I will definitely send you email with questions.
Sure.
In the meantime,
sure.
And basically don't worry about it and just focus, have your team focus exclusively on getting the open config stuff going, because that's definitely the most important. Great.
Sure.
All right.
Sure, Thomas. We'll make sure like it is there by most probably by this month end only we'll target. Let us see.
All right. Thank you. Thanks everybody, and we'll chat with you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.